Why Haskell Halt and Just Squeeze Buffy Mills, Wyatt Lim Lim. Hi there, thank you for joining. Today's video is about conflict of interest. So I posted a silly little TikTok video the other day and wow, I got a ton of views. Clearly this is an important issue to community because wow, really impressed with how many people actually watched that video. Obviously, it was an oversimplification of an important issue, but I think that the advice actually is true. The best way to avoid a conflict of interest is to just avoid them altogether, real or perceived. So there are the couple kinds of conflict of interest, right? So you've got real and perceived, and they carry consequence. So from a legal perspective, a real conflict of interest is it can leave an individual liable, open to litigation. The band or band members could sue members of council if they view their behavior to be in conflict. In particular, if there is financial gain. If there is financial gain, in some instances, individuals could be held accountable by repaying that financial gain to the band. So that's pretty significant. And there's precedents been set on this, by the way. So legal precedents has been set. It has happened in the past in other organizations. Obviously, it hasn't happened at OKIB, but that's one of the reasons why it's really important not to engage in those kinds of activities because you could be liable for it. The other consequence is that it really undermines the legitimacy of the table. It undermines the legitimacy of council. And it also undermines and erodes trust within the community. And this plays out in particular in really important issues. So say you have an economic development initiative and you want to put it forward to membership to vote on, and they don't participate or they vote it down. There is a pretty good chance that your community doesn't trust you if those things are happening. And they are telling you that they don't trust you and they don't trust your judgment based on their response or lack of response for that matter. They are telling you loud and clear that they don't trust you. So really important to consider the implications of conflict of interest. Granted, it is a little bit more complicated in Indigenous organizations, right? Bands as council often are elected by their family and they sit at a table and they are responsible. They have a fiduciary responsibility to all members, not just their families, but still you're sitting at a table and you have a large extended family and then all of our community is so interconnected. And then it's further complicated by the fact that we often have close personal friendships and relationships with people who might not even be related. So it does make things super complex. And it does make it a little bit difficult to navigate. But I think that if you feel that there might be a potential conflict, there probably is, right? And so the best course of action is to remove yourself. There are also some times or some situations where council will weigh in on whether or not they see it as a conflict of interest. And even if council decides that it's not a conflict or that you're not in conflict, still I would recommend reflecting because here's the thing, you're managing perceptions. At council table, you are always managing perceptions. You are always, you are in a fishbowl and council is being monitored and watched by its membership. And so if community perceives that conflict of interest, it can damage you, it can damage your reputation, right? So even if council comes in and says, oh, we don't see it as a conflict of interest, careful. You might want to remove yourself anyways, just to manage the perceptions of your constituents, okay? So there are some obvious conflicts of interest, right? Really obvious. Obvious would be, for example, advocating for funding and then submitting a proposal for the contract. Another conflict of interest would be in terms of procurement, right? You set the criteria for evaluating proposals, and then you submit a proposal. You have a clear advantage because you set the criteria. You have inside information that gives you a particular advantage. That's a conflict of interest. Using confidential information that is not accessible to everyone else for the benefit of your own personal or for own personal gain or for friends or family is also a conflict of interest. So really, and that can be present and future, by the way. So if you have access to confidential information and you leave office and then start a business afterwards that addresses a need that was identified in a confidential process, that's a conflict of interest. So there are some, and that one might be a little bit gray, right? People might not consider that. But again, we're dealing with both real and perceived. To protect your reputation, to avoid legal ramifications, it is important to just avoid conflicts of interest. Another conflict of interest would be like setting policy that provides you, your family, or your close personal friends a clear advantage. That's a conflict of interest. Now, the law is pretty clear in terms of how to manage conflict of interest. Council members are expected to disclose real or perceived conflicts of interest. They are expected to remove themselves from processes. And finally, they need to not vote in any matters that put them in a position of conflict of interest. So those are the requirements. And OKIB does have a conflict of interest policy. It's important, though, that members at the council table are enforcing those policies and following those policies at all times. And with that, I'm just going to leave it at that. I encourage you that if you have any questions of me, that you please reach out to me. I have there's so many ways to get a hold of me, and I really hope that you take the opportunity to get a hold of me through one of them. You can call me, email me, you can post on my Facebook page, you can send me a message on my Facebook, you can send me a message on my YouTube channel, you can send me a message through my WordPress. There are so many ways to get a hold of me. So I hope that you'll take the opportunity to ask me some questions. And with that, Lim Lim.